Hi everyone, Jane here again with another video. Thank you for watching today. I decided today that I wanted to start from a stamp, hence the title of the video. And I'm getting out a page from my handmade journal. It's a really simply made journal. And the stamps I've decided to start with are both sets from Be Crafty here in the UK. As always, I will list what I have used in the description box below. But if you've got similar products at home and you want to recreate this project, do please use what you have. Have a look, because I'm sure you might have things that are similar if not exactly the same. Now the two stamp sets I chose were this one, which has like stitchy borders and even a tape measure in it, and the other set was numbers, big numbers. So I debated whether to add some little numbers in as well, but that comes a bit later in another form. So I'm just starting off by using the stamps with some VersaFine Clair Nocturne, which is an oil-based ink or a pigment-based ink. I'm never sure which one it is, but whichever one, it is a waterproof ink, which means that when I later on use watercolours and other water reactive products on top, the stamping is not going to move. And that was the main thing. So that's the main sort of concern if you're adding stamping in first is, am I going to be using something that might move these lines later? If so, that might be something you want. Sometimes that's an effect that might look quite nice. But if, like me, you really wanted this very bold sort of background start that you want to still be able to see through by the end, then using a waterproof ink is really quite necessary. Now, I have in my stash lots of little bits of die cuts. Whenever I've in the past, in particular when I've been making really 3D mixed media projects, I die cut lots and lots and lots of elements from my sets so that I have them ready. So these are all lots of bits of leftovers. Now you will see here I have a real struggle with the glue. Now I debated, shall I cut this bit out? And then I thought no, because this is the reality of creating. You will get your glue out sometimes and you will try to use it and it will be blocked. So in the end I switched from my Cosmic Shimmer to my IndigoBlu Grab and Go, just because it was going to come out a lot easier. Nothing wrong with the glue. This is just, you know, glue is sticky. Glue gets blocked, and I should make sure that it's unblocked before I start my project, but I didn't. So I'm just sticking on different elements. Now these are all out of white card, but they are because I've cut them over a various time scales. Some of these have probably been in there for years. I wasn't sure what sort of cardstock most of them were cut out of. So some may have been watercolour, some were probably super smooth, some were very, very white, others were more on the creamy coloured side. So I will get round that after I finish this bit. But I won't show you is that I will unify the whole page. But first of all, I put a layer of clear gesso over it all. And then I thought, oh, I'm going to be using watercolours, maybe a watercolour ground. So once the gesso was dry, I put a layer of clear watercolour ground over the top. I don't know whether that makes any difference that I put that gesso down first, or it might make it better, might make it worse, might not make any difference. But that's what I did. But I didn't show that bit when I got past this stage. So I'm just laying down the die cuts. Now the big bulb that I laid down there actually isn't just one layer of card. It was one that I'd layered a couple of pieces of cardstock together, so it's slightly more raised than all the others. I thought that might look quite nice. And this is a way of getting some texture sometimes into your background. If you don't have things like stencils, but you do have die cuts, this is something that you can do to then add a little bit more texture into your background. Now, I started with a vague idea of a composition in my head, in that I wanted it to be mostly in the middle of the page so that I could leave some negative space around the edges. I say negative space because we usually always say white space, but it doesn't necessarily have to be white space. It's just space that you haven't filled with something else. So once I decided that my flow was going to be sort of from right top down to bottom left with my die cuts, I then wanted to add a little bit more texture, and I have got this stencil. It's a lemon creation one. It's called Back to Square One, and I'm just adding some white texture paste from Pretty Gets Gritty in through. I mostly went for the little squares. Then I left that all to dry thoroughly overnight, and then I added my gesso, then my watercolour ground, and then I let that dry thoroughly as well. So I'm using my little Qor palette here. Now, anybody who may have watched my video from the other day when I was talking about my crafty haul from last Christmas and my little bowerbird palette, I've seen in the comments that some very clever viewer who thinks outside the box more than me, obviously, suggested that because I couldn't really get on with the palette, that maybe I could take the ceramic part out and then use my tin as another travel palette and just use this as a palette on my, on my table, on my desk. And you know what? It's such a clever, simple idea that I hadn't even occurred to me. So I've got my little ceramic palette out of the bowerbird tin. What I've then done is the tin that I was using in my travel kit previously was a little bit damaged and was not closing very well. So I've taken the paints out of that, put that in my beautiful bowerbird tin, which is so pretty, and I'm now using that in my travel kit. And I've got this little ceramic palette on my table. So it's already got the Qor paints in. So I thought, well, that's handy because it will make me use them because it's right there in front of me. And in this case, I didn't really need to have a big brush. And then I've also got that mixing space in the middle. And because it's such a dinky little palette, it's not actually taking up hardly any space on my table. The only thing maybe is the paints. I suppose it could get dusty if I didn't cover them up. But to be honest, it's not a big concern. So I just was adding lots of water, lots of colour to this piece, and then I'm making sure it's dried off before I add some of these explosion powders. Now these are from Pretty Gets Gritty. They are a mixture of pigment powder and mica powder, and this first colour is called Atlas and the other colour I'm going to use is called Dragon. And I just wanted at this point a little bit of that mica sparkle. I didn't want too much because when you add mica over a project, because it's a bigger particle, it's opaque. So if it goes over the top of things like the stamping, it's going to cover it to an extent. So I was trying to be a little bit careful, adding quite a lot of water so it wasn't as thick as it could have been. But as you will see in a minute, I will blast all this out of the water because I then decided I needed a lot more gold. So I got my Winsor & Newton gold. I think it's the drawing inks. I don't think it's the calligraphy ones. I think they're called the drawing inks. Now it does split very quickly. I found that with all of these inks, they separate between the big thick particles and the liquid binder. So you have to give them a really good mix up. And then I'm just adding little bits into my background. Now again, I didn't want to add too much, so I added a lot of water just to give a streak of gold. Now here I've got some die cuts from Aall and Create from the, I think it's called Crawling Creations is the stamp and die set. So I cut those out in advance. I've got some rub-ons, which are the Remnant rubs from Holtz Ideaology, and they're called Specimen. And then I also had the tissue from Holtz Ideaology, which is called Entomology. So before I added any of those bits, I just wanted to bring out the texture in that background a bit more. So I'm using the IndigoBlu leather corset acrylic paint, and just with a little stippling brush, just putting a very light layer across the texture. Now I wasn't sure whether these transfers, because this is what these are, they're Remnant rubs, they are transfers, would work very well. You get 2 sheets in a pack and you get the little lolly stick to rub them off. Now what I tend to do is, rather than using the whole sheet and risk getting bits off the sheet that I didn't want, I cut the sections that I want to use, because it's a big sheet of all little bits that you can totally cut up to use small parts of, and it's easier to use them like this, I find. So then you take the backing off, you place the clear part down, and then you just rub with your lolly stick. Now anybody remembers back in the day when you used to get the letters that you used to do this, it was mostly always letters from what I remember. They weren't that great. Today I think the the transfer sheets are absolutely fantastic. I bought a few recently because I really wanted to start playing around with these. These are just your plain or black and white ones. Well, they're anything but plain. It's a fabulous set, but you can get beautiful coloured ones and all sorts now, and they rub off so easily that it wasn't a problem at all. Now, to be fair, I was sort of staying away from where there was too much texture or too much paint or anything like that, because I wanted to give them the best chance possible. But I'm not sure what cardstock this is at. I feel it's some kind of watercolour cardstock. It probably because I put it in the journal, but it's a while ago, so I've sort of forgotten. But they went on this card totally fine, and so I was more than happy with how this turned out. And because you got that little extra pop of black, which is what I was looking for, because although you can still see the stamping coming through the background, it was getting a little bit covered. Then I'm just putting where my main focal point is going to be, because I wanted to add this last little bit of transfer in here before I started working on the focal point. So here we go, it's a little bit of a closer, just so you can see the transfers. So I've chosen one of the little beetles. I love beetles. They're so beautiful and iridescent and shiny. And I wanted to sort of try and capture that with a bit of the colours that I put in the background. So I'm starting off by using the Qor Watercolours again, because like I said, now they're in that little palette on my desk. They will be being used really a lot. And then I wanted to add a little bit of the explosion powder back in, just to add that gold iridescent sort of feel to my little beetle. So then a bit more paint going in because I felt that I lost a bit of the blue. And then I let my little beetle dry. Now, once it dried, I decided it needed a little bit more of something to just lift him a little bit. So I've gone in with the Copic Acrylics in both gold and white to add a little bit more glitz, and then a little bit of highlight. Not too much, just a little bit, just to lift the colours a little bit. And then it's a case of building up my focal point. So I've got this tissue, collage tissue, I just want to use as a little bit of a background element behind the little Polaroid die cut. This die cut is one from Elizabeth Crafty, so I don't think it's available anymore, but there are other brands that do die cuts of Polaroids. Also, you could just cut a piece of card and then cut another little square out the top to make exactly the same sort of effect. I'm just using my Pinflair glue gel just to raise everything up, because I wanted it all to be a little bit more 3D than normal, which is why I've used this page from this journal, because when you've got loose leaf pages from a journal, you can build a lot more texture and dimension. So I'm just building them up, and then I will use a sentiment from the Tim Holtz labels. This one is called Thoughts, and I just chose Seen and Noted because I thought it looked a bit like a sort of a page out of a journal where you were looking at different sort of beetles and you snapped a photo and this is what you'd found. And then a little bit of thread just to add a little bit more dimension. So thank you ever so much for watching today. If you have enjoyed this video, do please give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't already subscribed, I'd love it if you could hit that subscribe button. It all really helps my channel. We also now have a hype button sometimes, so if you'd like to hype the video, it doesn't cost you anything and it helps get my video out there and seen by more people. At the end of the video, you'll also see a list of my lovely super supporters. They are my YouTube members, and I'd like to give them an extra big thank you for all their lovely support. And until the next time, bye bye.